Hello, hello. This is Jeff here with True Crime Myths, Legends, and more, coming at you with another episode. Today we have an incredible guest, retired LAPD Lieutenant Jeff Wennigner is with us. He just wrote a book called On Thin Ice, and he has 30 years experience with the LAPD. So everything that we've all heard about and kind of grew up in and of and around with everything going on in LA. He was there for that and has lots and lots of experience. So I'm really fascinated to get his take on everything, past, present, and future. So let's bring Jeff up on the stage. How's it going, Jeff?
It's going great. How are you doing?
Well, maybe. Oh, there we go. I don't know what happened there. Are
Yeah,
you back with us, Jeff?
yeah, you froze for a
Sweet.
moment.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Very strange. I think I need to check my connection. No, I'm on the 5G, so I don't know why that is. All right. Well, anyway, all right. So introduce yourself to everybody here.
Well, I'm Jeff Wennigner, and I'm a retired lieutenant from Los Angeles Police Department, where I served just over 30 years. And I'm the founder and CEO of Law Enforcement Consultants. And I'm an author of On Thin Ice. It was recently released just a little less than a month ago. And
Wow.
it deals with, law enforcement, the honest truths, and confront some of the difficult conversations that need to be had in order for law enforcement to be successful moving forward in the 21st century.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I worked for the Department of Juvenile Justice for a long time. I worked within the correction system. I was a deputy uh, corrections officer for some time, and yeah, there are certainly a lot of things within the system. I got to go, and I was fortunate. I had a friend that was very much he was a control force instructor, and so I did a lot of work with him. I got to train several of the local police departments, fire departments, EMTs in controlled force, and trying to do things the right way and escalate things the right way. We did a lot of quick cuffing and doing all that. So it's been some time, and thankfully standards have changed quite a bit since then. Because well, I mean, you look at the past, things were the way they were, and it has been a crazy world we live in. And I know for myself personally, when I was first getting involved in everything, I had a lot of officer friends that were like, "Oh, Jeff, you need to go to the academy. Get on the force, and we could all go." And at the time, I had my son is now he is 20 now, as of like 14 days ago. So he just turned 20, but at the time he was just an infant. And knowing that police work is very difficult, it asked a lot from people, and asked a lot from somebody who has a family, and lots of long hours, long nights, lots of difficulty. And I just made the decision at the time that it was not going to be a healthy thing for me and my family, so I chose not to. And I'll tell you now, with the climate and our society, uh, I'm glad that I didn't do that, because man, it is a very difficult thing for people to go out there now, and the animosity towards the police and the people that are out there to serve and protect has just been awful. The last 10 years, it has certainly gone downhill. And you have gotten to see all of that, being in LA during the times of the riots and Rodney King and, all of that stuff, you have certainly gotten to see the worst of the worst when it comes to all of those scandals and things that have come out of Los Angeles. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, I think what's really important is that your listeners understand the perspective that I came with to law enforcement. I have a very unique background where my mother was a teenage girl who put me up for adoption, and I was adopted by my parents. My father was a sociology professor at Kent State in Ohio. You've probably heard of Kent State, 4 dead in Ohio, where you had the May 4th,
Yeah.
1970 shootings of the students by the National Guard, which is kind of interesting because that was something that was very dynamic in my development and things that was at the forefront of the discussions as I was growing up in the community relative to what, if any, role should the National Guard have in civilian policing. And today we're having that same conversation. So
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting how things go full circle. But that being said, my parents wanted to have 4 children, each a year apart. I have a brother who's also adopted. He's Japanese. I have a foster sister who's Black. So I was raised in the 60s and 70s in the Midwest in Kent, Ohio, with a multiracial family. So that just in and of itself gave me some experiences that are very unique to anybody, really, that I took into my law enforcement career, which speaks volumes to the paradigm in which I looked at my experiences through. That being said, I went out to Los Angeles with the intention of staying for 5 years. My father, before I started a PhD program, he encouraged me to go get 5 years of practical law enforcement experience in a large agency. And that was my intention when I chose Los Angeles, to go 5 years and then return to my academic studies and pursue my PhD and be a professor of criminal justice. But as life often has it for most people, plans tend to change, and there's a different course for me. And I stayed for a total of 33 years in law enforcement. I did 3 years with the LA County Sheriffs as a deputy sheriff, and then I lateraled over to the LAPD, and I did just over 30 years with the LAPD. But my career started at a very, very toxic time. You had the Rodney King beating in 91, and in 92, you had the riots just after the acquittals of the 4 officers that were involved. And seeing that unravel and being in tune to the sociological issues and aspects that played a role in how Los Angeles became this tinderbox to explode was rather a unique experience for me, especially very early on in my career.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Yeah.
it really molded how I saw things, because many times, law enforcement officers, they we tend to be a little insular in our thought process because of our experiences, and it takes a concerted effort to maintain some level of objectivity relative to the communities that you're policing. And oftentimes my colleagues didn't really understand the decades of sociological influences on the communities that we were policing that really had a strong impact on the relationship that the police and the communities had. So it was an eye-opening experience. But there's the stuff that's going on today in regards to the hostility towards law enforcement. That's something I dealt with very early on in my career.
Yeah. Well, you figure during that time when all that was going on, the intense scrutiny that you guys were under, just in every single action that you would take, just because of all of the issues that were happening, the socioeconomic issues, the racial issues that were happening there, and it's just an incredible powder keg to be able to start your career in that place where and how that shaped you going forward, and looking at law enforcement and looking at how to deal with all of those things, and deal with the public. I'm sure has influenced you a great deal.
Well, it did, and one thing, I was very, very fortunate that I had some partners early on in my career that gave me some insight that I just didn't have, having come from the Midwest and growing up in a town of about 24,000 people. And here I was now in a community of millions and very diverse. English oftentimes wasn't the primary language spoken in certain neighborhoods. And the cultures of the various backgrounds that people had were very foreign to me. And I was lucky to have some partners that really gave me some insight in the importance of being able to meet people where they are when you're engaging them and interacting with them, because that's what's really important relative to building trust with the communities that you serve. And trust is so important because you need people first and foremost to feel comfortable interacting with the police to report crime.
Yeah.
And if they're not victims, but witnesses coming forward and sharing what they've observed and witnessed relative to crime, and especially today, in the environment that we're in, where we have an incredibly high risk of domestic and international terrorism. If you see something, say something. You need to have that trust of the communities in which you're serving, where the people feel comfortable coming forward and sharing information that, when analyzed, can potentially give the opportunity to prevent a terrorist attack from occurring.
Yeah. It's such a crazy time to live because there is so much incredible division right now between people, and this these ideas of you know everybody tattling on everybody else, and who's watching. And I think uh it's just so uh such a strange time to live, because things have changed so drastically in the last 8 years, from all of these things that have happened politically and things like that. And I try to stay pretty apolitical, but it's very difficult when we have people out there that are on one side, we have people out there on the other side, and they're certainly, we're seeing it now, the fruits of that, people literally taking up arms against one another because of different political ideologies and beliefs. And it's a very dangerous place to live right now, when you don't know what you can say, what you can't say, and who's going to be out there and be angry about it. um, One of the
Well,
things that go ahead.
what's really important relative to that is when you apply it to law enforcement should not be taking sides whatsoever. It's important that they stay neutral and that they're providing their services to everybody regardless of what someone's political ideology may be. And unfortunately, we've gotten to a place where these conversations, it's hard to have these conversations without somebody saying the Democrats or the Republicans or they or what have you. And it's really important just to have these conversations and speak of the issues rather than against the conflicting opinion. So the reality is, it's like much of what law enforcement is confronting today. We just need to be asking ourselves, is it about power? Is it about justice? Is it about humanity? And try to make our assessments and our judgments based on those sorts of things, and try to determine the best path forward in regards to what is what is best for the largest group of people, and in regards to societal values and mores and things. And it's unfortunate that we're in a place where we demonize the other side, where I got to be honest, the true path forward for the best results is achieved when you sit down at a table with conflicting opinions and people can talk them out. And this has been a challenge for law enforcement because oftentimes they're demonized by members of the community, when really we need to have some type of collaboration where we're speaking together and have understanding, because understanding is how you build that trust, and that trust needs to be reciprocated in both directions. And then when you do that, you're going to achieve the best path forward. And we not only need to do this as a society here in America, but in law enforcement, in dealing with the communities that we serve every day. And that's really the challenge. It's unfortunate. A lot of people's, reality, words have consequences. They really do. And
Yeah.
they uh, they can manifest behaviors, because they influence people's beliefs and attitudes, and those beliefs and attitudes influence your behaviors and actions. So we really do need to be real about that and understand the impact of what we're saying and how we're being perceived by others and how our words can influence the actions of others. It's very important.
Yeah, for sure. And we see that more and more all the time, whether it's, people going online and, finding their group of people that are, espousing all of these ideas and these beliefs and supporting them in that. And then they go out and do things. Uh, one of the things I've got a magazine that I'm working on called True Crime Quarterly, and in our first issue, we're gonna really focus on the Delphi murders, which was a case that I got really involved in, and went and visited Delphi, Indiana, and really tried to understand what was going on in that case. Um, I don't necessarily think that they got it right. And so it continues to persist with lots of evidence that wasn't presented at trial, and I'll be interested to see what happens on appeal with that case. But with that, the other thing that I was really looking at doing uh, for the first issue, and it will probably end up being the second issue now, was this idea of this assassination culture that we are growing here in the United States, and we're seeing more and more of all the time. I mean, this year alone, there's been, 6 or 7 assassination attempts on public figures. And, this idea that, that we're going to be able to stop it before it starts. And ultimately, what you end up doing is emboldening that person's ideology and making them a martyr for whatever cause they have. You're really not stopping anything. So it's interesting to see that happening now, where we have these young people that believe that, well, if I just cut the head off, that'll kill the movement, or whatever is going on. And when you look at that historically, that's never the case. There's always someone else. There are always other people that are following that are now going to rise to prominence. And it's it really is a shame that we've lost that understanding of history, and understanding of, the things that have happened before, and we continue to make the same mistakes over and over again, rather than, again, sitting down at the table, talking, and coming to some kind of resolution about things.
Well, that's true. Through my 33 years in law enforcement, I found that there's actually more things that I have in common with the bad actors that I would be arresting than I have that are different.
Yeah.
And the reality is, it's trying to find the ways that you can align and resonate with somebody, and because really in law enforcement, it's about being smarter. You don't want to work harder. So you
Yeah.
obviously want to try to get voluntarily compliance when you're taking somebody into custody and stuff. And there's things that you can do in law enforcement that'll make that job more difficult. There's things that you can do that'll make that job more likely to occur and make it easier for you. And so it really is a part about trying to find things that you have in common with people that are on the opposite side of an issue. And whether it's a political or whether it's in law enforcement, and you're taking bad actor to jail, it's really important. And unfortunately, there's all kinds of theories on why we are where we are today in regards to the increased levels of violence and people's willingness to act out in a violent way in regards to an answer to their conflict with an opposing group. And that really just needs to stop. There's I even see it. I've got a 14-year-old son, and it's kind of interesting seeing what his experiences are. growing up in the school district and how children interact compared to how they interacted when I was growing up. It's very different.
Yeah.
And young children these days, and even middle-aged and high school kids, and they they have different social experiences, and the things that influence how they interact and how they feel comfortable. It's amazing. I'm always amazed at how well these children these days feel comfortable speaking to adults. Because I remember I really didn't speak to an adult unless spoken to, and I was very, very polite, and I had anxiety in speaking to adults, but they're very comfortable speaking to adults, but they surely don't speak very well to each other.
Yeah.
There seems to be a lot more animosity between their peers, and not much empathy. And really, empathy is a key for society as well as law enforcement, police, and communities having empathy for the various circumstances that people are in. Whether you're making an arrest of somebody or somebody's just lost a child in a car accident or what have you, it's really important that you have the empathy, and that person can read that in you and see that in you, and it has to be authentic type of empathy for
Yeah.
people to build that relationship that needs to be built.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed when I was working in the jail system is, going in there and realizing that I was only one stupid mistake away from being right where those guys were, like on the opposite side of the bars. Like, I could go out one night and go and, run somebody over with my car and end up in there for vehicular manslaughter. If I was out drinking at the bar and got myself in trouble, it would be really, really simple to be able to go and do that and for my life to radically change. And so, going in there and working with those inmates and being able to sit there and say, listen, I understand, I'm not on the other, like I'm right here with you, and so it was always really interesting to me. Uh, and you always have that one guard who wants to put the screws to everybody and treat everybody, take everybody's mat. And we had one of those guys. And I remember I left. I started working for the Department of Juvenile Justice, and while I was working for the Department of Juvenile Justice, I had left the prison and I was out doing some stuff in the community. And I had a couple guys come up to me one day and they said, Ignatowski, man, it's a good thing you were one of the good ones in there. Cause that other guy, man, if we'd see him out here, we'd kill that son of a bitch. And I was like, ooh, man, I understand. Because just like you mentioned, you can either do it, the easy way, or you can make it really, really difficult for people. But people remember that. And when you're in a county jail like that, you got to know that a lot of those people are in your community. You're going to see them at some point out there. And so, it's just, it's a crazy thing. You really need to be able to treat people and have that empathy and to understand that. I've told this story several times too. But, I was there one time and there was a riot in the jail, and we had dormitories there. It was one officer to 64 inmates. And so I'm in a dorm by myself with 64 other guys. And I walk in there in the morning to start my shift, and you've got the white guys on one side, the black guys on the other. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a problem today. And, fortunately, I knew everybody from all the different factions. And I went in there and I said, hey, what's going on, guys? And they're upset about whatever beefs they had. And I said, listen, I get it. It's difficult. You're in here with 64 other people. It's a problem. I said, uh, go to sleep, relax, go and work out if you need to, whatever y'all need to do. But I'm here until 3 o'clock, and I'd like to go home today. And I'd like to not have any problems. Now, thankfully, they respected me enough that they were more than willing to quiet down and do what they needed to. I never had to do anything to really enforce anything on anybody. But about a half hour after my shift, I heard that it went down in there, and somebody else had come in, and they were not as empathetic to them as I was, and it just blew up in there. And but it's so easy when you have people from different backgrounds, different ideas, all together in one place. It becomes a powder keg, um, and it's very, very easy to upset that, whether that's in a city, whether that's in, a state, or if that's in a correctional facility. It is the same dynamics. When you put people all together, you just don't know how that's going to come out.
Right. Yeah, it's really about competency levels of in that circumstance, the correction officers, or in my circumstance, of police officers. And I worked in custody for 3 years when I was at the LA County Sheriff's Department. That's the largest county jail system in the country. And the number of inmates that we would go in and out every day. I worked at the inmate reception center, so everybody that came into the jail system or was exiting the jail system came through our doors. So I was dealing with everybody, from someone that's arrested for a suspended license to, someone that's, mass murder.
Yeah.
When I was in there, I saw the Menendez brothers on a daily basis. I had conversations with people that committed some of the most heinous crimes you could ever imagine. Um, but at the end of the day, you have to treat them with respect, because if you don't, you're actually making your job more dangerous for yourself and for your peers in law enforcement, because they do build up this animosity. And
Yeah.
it's there can be, it may seem counterintuitive to some people, but there can be a respect between different entities, law enforcement and the criminal bad actors. You can have shared respect where that's going to impact how you interact with one another, and it can avoid you can avoid these highly violent circumstances from occurring. And I when I was working in custody, you'd have inmates would get involved in a fight in a cell, and you had your deputies that come in there and just indiscriminately swinging their metal flashlights, hitting everything they possibly could, to include other deputies, because that's how out of control they were. You're not gaining any respect doing that. It's about being properly trained, being competent, and carrying yourself with confidence. And that's one thing that's challenging for law enforcement right now. We, by and large, in this country, don't train our police officers in a manner that's going to warrant them being successful, especially under the most stressful, rapidly unfolding tactical scenarios. If you first look at the police academies, the average police academy is only 800 hours. And to
Yeah.
put that in context, to apply for your cosmetology license, you need 1,500 hours of training. So, I mean, that's, almost twice as much training as a law enforcement officer needs before they hit the streets as a sworn police officer. And, if you look at firearms training, only 1% of law enforcement officers in this country are required to fire on a monthly basis at the range. And it's
Wow.
about 60% fire 1 to 2 times a year. That's it. So the question is, when things do not go optimally and we want to be critical of law enforcement, is it appropriate to be critical of the individual officer, or is it something larger than that? Is it an organizational thing, or is it actually just the standards that are being imposed that aren't high enough, because the training does not result in the behaviors and the actions and officers that we would like to see? And those are really the challenges. You look at other countries, you can look at the Nordic countries, where their academies are 2 and 3 years long, where you obtain the equivalent of an undergraduate degree in criminal justice. And what they're doing is they're watching you throughout the entire process. You don't have a job until you're done, and you may not be selected. So they're looking to see how do you respond to training. Do you possess characteristics that are likely to be indicative of you being successful in law enforcement? Are you empathetic? We've spoken about that already. Are you a critical thinker? Do you have problem-solving skills? Are you willing and able to have the courage to question the status quo? And ask, is this is the way we've done it, but is there a better way? Those are the types of things that we need in law enforcement officers moving forward to best navigate the most successful way to move forward in the 21st century. So, those are all things that we need to evaluate and look at, and see how they would apply here in the United States. Policing in other countries isn't the same here in many aspects, but it doesn't mean that we should ignore or not consider the things that they're doing that appear to be working out well, and figure out how we can apply that here.
Yeah, for sure. That's one thing that I think is important. We need to take the things that are working elsewhere and figure out how we can use that to make it work for us. Because it is, you mentioned something earlier, and this idea of respect between policing and criminals, and not to look back into the past, but there was a time in our history where we had officers and beat cops that walked around the neighborhood. They knew everyone in the neighborhood. They had good rapport with the people in the neighborhood. Crime still happened. The criminals are still going to do what they're going to do. But very often, if the officer came up and was there, they could curb a lot of those things. They knew exactly where to go. They knew exactly who to talk to, because they knew everything that was going on, and they had developed those relationships within the community where people would come and tell them things and say, hey, this is going down over here next week, pay attention. And somewhere along the line we've lost a lot of that, and it's become very impersonal, but not just within the policing, but even within our own society. People don't know their neighbors. You see it in other countries where, like, I've been down to Costa Rica several times, and in the towns, they still have their town square. Everybody gets down there, everybody hangs out, spends time together. They have little festivals and things like that, and the whole community gets together. And you see that very, very rarely here in the United States anymore. Often you don't know the people that live right next door to you, and that is a huge departure from what we had for years and years and years, where communities knew each other. They helped each other. When somebody was sick or in the hospital, the whole community got together and brought them food, so they could make it through until they got back to health. And that has changed so much in the last 20, 30 years, that that really it's a whole different community altogether.
Yeah, I mean, that's you've underscored one of the main challenges that law enforcement faces, and it's really about the mindset and what you view your role as a law enforcement officer as actually being. When I got on a job, 35 years ago, we had more of a guardian mindset, and I would say over time, um, that it's become more of a warrior mindset, um, where we focus hyper vigilantly on the use of force to resolve issues when dealing with the public, versus using de-escalation techniques and those sorts of things. And therein lies another one of the training voids. Only about 25% of law enforcement officers get shoot or don't shoot type training. That's a problem, um, because it's these highly public, volatile situations that are handled in a way that, to many people observing it, would say that that wasn't appropriate, or that was excessive, or there was a better way. And it's the more incidents that we have like that, the larger divide we have between law enforcement and the communities that they serve. And that's something that really needs to be addressed. During my career, I often took every opportunity I could to try to engage the public. And oftentimes when I'd make traffic stops, I wouldn't cite the individual. I'd interact with them. I'd often tell them, tell me a joke, and they'd tell me a joke, and I'd give them a warning. And because so people are like, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm looking at this from a bigger, larger perspective. I'm trying to build this rapport with people that live in this neighborhood where they get to know me more on a personal level than just viewing me as the law enforcement officer. And they feel comfortable confronting me and telling me what's going on, and being witnesses, and helping me solve crimes. I used to go into the projects and throw the football around with the kids there, and but really for two reasons. One, so they saw that I wasn't the enemy, and also, maybe even more importantly, that I didn't see them as the enemy. And if you can just reach one of those children, wherein they're going to have an influence somewhere along the line, that they're going to have to make a decision: is it the gang or is it something different? And if they can say, "Yeah, I remember that Officer Wenningger, he was a good guy," and they choose not to subscribe to the indoctrination of a gang, then your time and effort is well worth it. And although I used to get ridiculed for doing those sorts of things, I just thought it was an invaluable opportunity that I had to influence communities, especially the young children in the community, to perhaps make some decisions that will result in a better path forward for them down the road. Even to this day, as a retired, Los Angeles police lieutenant, I'm a volunteer crossing guard in my community, where I
Oh, wow.
cross the intermediate schools every morning and every afternoon. And I know all the kids by first name, and I can tell which kids are having a good day or bad day. And I know when it's time I need to interject and see what's going on. And it's amazing the information that I can find out, where I can pass it on to their parents, or I can pass it on to the school, or those sorts of things relative to what they're sharing with me happens to be going on in their daily lives. And it's just very important. It speaks volumes of what you're talking about, how it's about the community, where they say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it really does. And at the end of the day, we're a stronger unit as a family if we have a strong community.
Yeah. I know one of my, I don't know where it's at right now on my shelf, but one of my favorite movies, speaking of all of that stuff, is the movie with Denzel Washington. And I forget who the other guy is, but he's playing a cop. I don't know
Is
if
that
it's in LA.
training day?
Yeah,
I think it's
Training Day.
mhm.
That
Ethan
movie,
Hawke.
it is just so eye opening. And that's exactly what ends up happening in that movie. Of course, Denzel is a bad cop. He's doing all kinds of drug deals and stuff like that. Uh, and he's taken this other guy under his wing, and is training him. But he ends up stopping the rape of this one little girl, and it happens to, by the end of the movie, you find out that it's one of the gang leaders' nieces, and they find out, and it ends up saving his life in the end. And you really never know, like, the people that you're going to be able to influence with some of those, just that goodwill, going out there and doing those things, and doing what's right, and making sure that you take care of the community and the people around you, and how that's going to turn out in the end. Because there is, within those communities, within the gangs and things like that, there are a lot of, there's a lot of respect. There is a lot of, if you take care of me, we'll take care of you. And there is that kind of community. And if you can facilitate some of that, and help that along, you can grow that. It is a, a strength with them. Um, but instead, a lot of times we just vilify it and want to put the screws to everybody, and that just continually creates this huge divide between the two, when we could um, go about it a different way. So one of the things that's interesting for me, because you've mentioned a bunch of times training, and different officers not being trained. uh, is it an issue with finances, or is it just an issue with the people that are in charge not understanding the need for those things?
Well, I think training is expensive.
Yeah,
That's a reality, and that's where we have to, as law enforcement professionals, look at our model of staffing law enforcement. If you look at vast majority of law enforcement agencies, they have sworn personnel assigned to positions that don't actually require the person that fills that position to have a status of a sworn personnel. And the reality is that we probably could get by with hiring fewer sworn personnel and hiring civilian staff to do these jobs that we have civilian personnel doing, who oftentimes work at like 50% of the rate of what a sworn personnel would cost, and then use those funds to better train law enforcement. Unfortunately, there tends to be the practice where they just want to show that we've done our due diligence. It's about
yeah,
saying that we're not liable because we provided this training. Let me tell you, a vast majority of training these days is e-training. You get these emails with this video that you're supposed to watch, and then you take this test afterwards or what have you, and that's your training. But there's no determining that you've achieved what it is that the training is attempting to achieve. And oftentimes, and I deal with a lot of law enforcement expert testimony cases with the use of force incidents. I've seen multiple times in depositions where you have an officer acknowledging, yeah, I said that I completed that training, but I didn't. And that's what happens oftentimes in e-training. So, law enforcement needs to really take um, this reality and fix the problem. I mean, 42% of law enforcement officers don't even get any regular defensive tactics training. 42%. So, when something escalates and then they choose to go to their firearm and use lethal force, perhaps could be because they don't feel competent in their abilities in the grappling or utilization of pugilistics to be able to control a suspect. And it's about competence. And we have to ensure that our officers are competent, not just that we check the box that says they've had this training, but much of this training is what's called a perishable skill type training. And many states will have every 2 years, you'll go to like grappling, where you'll review, wrestling techniques and things for a 2 hour block or a 4 hour block of instruction every 2 years. Well, let me tell you, if that's all you're relying on to be successful out in the field in the event you get involved in that type of a use of force incident, you're probably not going to, bode well in that confrontation. And
yeah,
unfortunately, we don't even provide the opportunity for officers to donate their own time and to get free training within department facilities. We don't even provide that. So, there's a huge void that needs to be addressed and corrected. Much of society looks at law enforcement officers and thinks that they're these highly trained individuals. They're really not. That's the reality. I hate to say it, but the vast majority of law enforcement officers are not trained to the level that much of society believes they are.
yeah. I know one of the guys that I used to train with all the time, and uh, he was the one that was certified in controlled force. And we there was in Erlanger, Kentucky. They had the police department did have a gym where they had a boxing ring and they had mats and everything set up. And we would take a lot of the officers down there and work with them on grappling techniques. I fought professionally for a long time. So did the officer that was there. So we would bring in a lot of people. But again, it was, you know, many of those guys, they were going on their own volition, on their time off to come and do that. And we loved having them come in there because it gave us more bodies to work with. But at the same time, it was certainly not everybody, and most of them were not competent. And on top of that, you go from yes, you can do these certain things and these certain techniques, but that's a completely different thing in a stressful situation. It is completely different when there is someone attacking you, or they're attacking someone else, and being able to do that in a situation where there's not just maybe one person, there's 4 or 5 people there, is very, very difficult. And I think a lot of people, the general public, doesn't understand that all of those factors really change the dynamics of all of that. And on top of that, you have an officer that may be carrying 60, 70 pounds on them, with their gear and everything on. It is completely different. It's very, very difficult to hold some kind of position on the ground, grappling around with somebody when you have, your gun belt on, your ammunition, and worried about if somebody is going to be able to take your weapon away from you. It is not as simple as just, hey, let's grab this guy and throw him on the ground and hold him there. It is very, very different than that. And people don't really have the full understanding. It is much easier to pull your weapon and hold people off, which is ends up what happens more often than not, rather than rolling around with somebody and trying to get them down and to cuff them, to get them under control or in compliance. It ends up being a situation where it's much easier to use your weapon to do that, because people are a hell of a lot more compliant with a gun in their face. So it's not as simple as, but again, that's why there needs to be training. There needs to be understanding. Uh, I remember they used to, my buddy Steve would always get out the red man suit, and we'd have guys out there and we'd be working with them, and you'd have this big guy come out, and you know it, you kick him in the groin and he just kind of looks at you and laughs, and it's always an unsettling thing when that happens.
Yeah. The one key is that law enforcement officers need to understand that every time that you confront somebody, they're sizing you up. They're deciding whether they're going to fight, flee, or cooperate. And oftentimes they're going to make that decision based on their first impression of you. And when you train, like you've spoken about being competent, you're going to just naturally carry yourself with this confidence. And people can read that. And it can go down to even whether you have shined boots or not. Somebody that takes the time to shine their boots is perceived as somebody that, if they're taking care of that, they're taking care of all the other things as well. And if you keep yourself in a semblance of physical conditioning where you look sharp in uniform, you have creases in your uniform, and you carry yourself with confidence, shoulders back, head up, um, that can prevent a lot of physical altercations, because the individual that's sizing you up is saying, not today. This is not the officer I want to pick this fight with. And oftentimes it can be prevented just by your commitment and being able to carry yourself with the confidence, because you're competent in these various areas that you potentially may have to resort to. So, that's just something that I can't say enough about, the importance of just the command presence that is, it's garnered through competence, essentially, and making sure you're physically fit, you look sharp, and you feel comfortable being able to address a circumstance in any direction it may go.
So I don't know why it made me think of this. I'm interested in your take on this, because this is an increasing movement that is going on right now that is, I think, very, very difficult and potentially dangerous for officers. Is this whole idea of the sovereign citizens, and these people that are going around with their signs in the back of their car, that they don't ascribe to any of this here in the United States. And it it's really a crazy thing. I started seeing that stuff pop up on social media, a couple years ago, and I thought this isn't possible. Like that people actually believe uh, that they live here and that they're not governed by any of the laws and practices of the cities and states that we live in. And they think that somehow legally they're going to be protected that way. And but you see it often now, that people are doing that. And then you also have those same people that are, they have their dash cams and they're filming all these interactions, whether that is to get social media followings or if it is just to embarrass these officers or whatever. It to me it's a very, very concerning thing that is going on there and really undermines everything that you guys are trying to do to keep everybody safe and protected.
Right. Well, we live in a land of laws, and the reality is that everybody here, um, is susceptible to the enforcement of those laws. Um, that being said, we have a number of different challenges in addressing various groups who have different ideas about their responsibility in our society and here in America. But that doesn't change what you do as a law enforcement officer. I just think it just underscores the importance of what we've talked about here today. Being compassionate and empathetic and having some type of understanding and building levels of trust with these various groups, because at the end of the day, the reason these groups have the ideologies that they have is there's a lack of trust. They don't trust the government. They don't trust that of which represents the government, and that can be that can take you down a very, very toxic road, and you want to try to avoid that. But no, that's it's definitely that amongst a number of things right now in our society, our challenges for law enforcement and society as a whole.
Yeah. So I know I was looking at before I was looking at your bio and everything, and it mentions in there that you've worked a lot with Secret Service and dealing with dignitaries and things like that coming into Los Angeles and providing protection for them and backing up the Secret Service and the different other enforcement law enforcement agencies out there. Uh, what are your thoughts on all of that currently going on? Because there's been several lapses in security recently in the last several years.
Well, I would say that my experience working with the Secret Service was nothing but profound. I mean, they were very professional, extremely competent, beyond competent. They were the model to be exemplified. I worked Metropolitan Division, which is the elite unit of the LAPD, tactical unit of the LAPD. So anytime the president, vice president, first lady, or a head of state came to Los Angeles, we would work with the Secret Service and the State Department in providing those security details. And, it could be at the hotels or wherever they're remaining overnight or the locations they're going to, whether it's a Democratic fundraising dinner or at a celebrity's home or what have you. It was diversified. And we had Alberto Fujimori. We had to provide dignitary protection for him, where he was a very controversial leader. But, some of the stuff like with the Butler, PA, with the attempted assassination of then, the President Trump, I just couldn't reconcile what I was seeing because it wasn't the truth that I knew of the Secret Service. And I speak about it in my book, On Thin Ice. I have a chapter that I break down and discuss that entire incident. And in a nutshell, it's complacency. Um, it's complacency in the mindset of nothing has gone wrong, so then therefore nothing will go wrong.
Yeah.
And standards relative to ensuring that we're maintaining best practices and we're continually trying to find ways to improve and check our competency levels in the various security details that we're performing. had become absent. And I think we can get back there to the standard in which I saw them perform at. But it's going to take some work. Now, I would say this: I don't buy into all the DEI stuff. It's the females or the minority. That's just nonsense. I mean, there's people that are excellent, from every group, and there's people that are deficient in every group. And if you're just honest about that, you can have a 6'2", 220-pound white male that's just as deficient as somebody else. So,
That's for
the
sure.
reality is it's the DEI just doesn't that argument doesn't cut it for me. And that's been my experience, that you have excellence at every level and you have deficiencies at every level in every group. So, but it's about complacency. We need to get away from the complacency. We have to ask more of ourselves and not wait for someone to impose that ask on us. In law enforcement, that we can't wait till things go wrong before we start assessing and evaluating ourselves. Secret Service should be biopsying, random details and seeing what sort of things they could be doing better. I mean, it's unconscionable that they had, the setup there where they didn't have any high ground. They weren't using drones. They weren't. I mean, it was amazing. How could somebody get high ground that close to, a presidential candidate? It just boggled my mind, especially someone that had the threat levels that he had. And then I didn't like the way it was handled. You're pointing the fingers and trying to blame the local law enforcement. Bottom line is the buck stops with you. You're the Secret Service. It's your detail. So I didn't like that. And I speak about all of these sorts of issues relative to my book On Thin Ice, where I'm honest about the deficiencies in law enforcement, whether it's in the Secret Service or it's in local law enforcement that I spent my 33 years in Los Angeles. There's something to be learned. And what we tend to unfortunately do in law enforcement is LAPD, we made all kinds of mistakes. Back in the late 90s, we had the Rampart scandal, where the Rampart crash unit, which is the gang unit, you had officers that were engaged in off-duty bank robberies and stealing pounds of cocaine out of evidence lockup and selling it on the streets for personal gain, and getting involved in officer-involved shootings and planting guns to justify them. I mean, all kinds of anything you can think of, they were engaged in. And you just got to scratch your head and go, how did we get here? How are these sorts of things able to be occurring at the rate and scope that they were? And nothing was being done to identify this. But it ultimately ended up with us having a consent decree, a federal consent decree. It took us nearly 10 years to get out from under. And during that time, I was sent to Rampart. I happened to make sergeant right when the scandal was occurring, and I was sent there as part of the new leadership team to clean things up. And then after I was there for a bit as a sergeant, I was then chosen to run the new gang unit. It was called the Gang Enforcement Detail, because they abolished crash. And I had to impose, all these new standards and have, different, measures of effectiveness, and better select and evaluate the personnel that I brought into the unit. And, the unit that I put together, it wasn't really necessarily a reflection of me. It was a reflection of the quality people that were brought into the unit. And, they developed a model that was exemplified by all other gang units in the city of Los Angeles. And so, I've seen how law enforcement can fail when we're not doing the things we need to be doing and learning the lessons from other organizations when they make their mistakes. But I've also seen how things can go well. And we need to be looking for both of those things, finding those things that have gone wrong, how we can learn from that, and then looking at things that have gone well and making sure that we emulate that moving forward. And, that's the way that we'll be the best version of ourselves. And that's really what's important. And that's what brought so much frustration upon me. You look at the Memphis Tyree Nichols beating and death. I watched that after my experience running the Rampart gang unit. And I'm watching these videos, and, this wasn't a use of force. This was just an outright crime. And the lessons that we learned in Los Angeles over 2 decades earlier, had they paid attention to those lessons that we learned, they could have avoided this entire incident from occurring. So that's where we, as law enforcement in the United States, need to grow. we can't be so insular where we just worry about what's happening within the confines of our own organization. We have to look elsewhere and learn from the lessons that other people are having, and use a blueprint of the best practices moving forward as a result of what we learn from others' mistakes.
For sure. Well, all right. Well, we're already at an hour. So tell people where they can find your stuff and how they can connect with you.
Okay, well, I'm Jeff Wennigner. You can find me on LinkedIn or on Facebook. I do quite a lot of writing, a number of articles and blogs and things. You can find them there. I have the newly released book, On Thin Ice. You can go to onthinicebook.com and you can learn more about the book there and actually order it. You can buy it on a number of different platforms, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, or any bookstore near you that carries books. So it's an interesting read. It talks about my personal background, my professional experiences, practical insights, and what I believe are some actionable solutions that we can implement moving forward in the 21st century to be successful.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your background and your experiences with us, because it is important that we are at a turning point right now where things could get really, really ugly, or they can start getting better. And without really doing some real reflection and understanding of history and of who we are as people, I fear that we are in for some worse times ahead. But hopefully, people will take some time to do that reflection, and we can get to things that are much much better than they are currently.
Yep,
So
and that's the key for the book, On Thin Ice. What is to be gleaned from that is that we're on thin ice, but we as law enforcement professionals, we still can control our destiny moving forward. And it's incumbent upon us to be honest about our past, where we currently are, in order to determine what's the best path forward.
absolutely. Cool, man. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'll definitely keep in contact, because I would love to see how things are going, and what you're doing in the future, because I think it is really important that we get past all of this stuff that we're currently dealing with.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, Jeff. We'll talk to you soon. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of True Crime Myths, Legends, and More. Uh, you know, get out there, be involved in your community. Go out there and do the things that really need to be done, and take that time, because it takes all of us to make this thing better. Because the way that it is right now, and the things that are going on, are certainly not going to help us. So thank you for your participation, and we will see you next week.